Hello Spiderlings, good morning, good afternoon and good evening wherever you are in the world today. And today we are heading into a little bit of a Satisfactory tutorial. Now I don't claim to be an expert, but what I am hoping to do here is to show you a few ideas of what you can do with some basic iron item setups. So we're going to go through the three different ore nodes, which is the impure, the normal and the pure nodes. So starting off with the impure node, this Mark 1 mine is producing 30 items per minute, as you can see on this Mark 1 belt, how they are separated, as the Mark 1 belt can carry 60 items per minute. So starting off we have the iron plates. Now the iron plates work on a 1-to-1 ratio with the smelter to constructor, as a smelter can produce 30 iron ingots per minute. So for the iron plates, it's a 1-to-1 ratio smelter to constructor, because the constructor takes 30 iron ingots to produce 20 iron plates per minute. Now moving on to the iron rods, we have a 1-to-2 ratio, because the iron rods take 15 iron ingots to produce 15 iron rods. So from the 30 being produced in the smelter, we can split this into two constructors, as we have done so here, and then we can remerge them at the end if we so wish to add the 30 together on one line. There are several different ways that you can go about manipulating afterwards where the items go and how they traverse that way. You can merge them together. You can add a splitter and merge them round so that you can have 10 going one way, 20 going another way, or you can even just leave them both as 15 separately. There's so many different ways you can go. It all just depends on what you need for your needs and what suits your factory that you've got built. So finally we have got the iron screws. Now these are basically a repeat of the iron rod setup, because we need the rods to make the screws, so there's an extra step involved, so there's a little bit more space taken up. So again, we've got the one smelter being split off into the two constructors, and then we can add all of these together to give us the 30 rods, split them equally with the splitter with the three outputs of 10 per line, because these screws take 10 iron rods to produce 40 screws. Now if you're going to add all of these together, you'll see this belt at the end is different. That is a Mark II belt, as the Mark II belt carries 120 items, with these three constructors producing the 120 together. If you were to keep them all separately, then yes, you could still use the Mark I belts, as you can see, that are coming out of the end of each constructor, but when we then merge them all together, as in this example here, you then need a Mark II to get the full efficiency, as the Mark I belt doesn't have enough space to take the 120 items. So with the smelter producing just the 30 iron ingots, it doesn't make any sense for you to have any sort of factory build to produce all three of these items from this node. However, as we now move on to the better producing nodes, we'll be able to build a small mini basic factory at the end. Right then, we move on to the normal node, which produces us 60 iron ore per minute, which is a full Mark 1 belt, as you can see here. So to start off with, we are able to use two smelters for the one node. So starting off with the iron plates here, you can see again it's a 1-to-1 ratio. As we know, it's 30 iron ingots to make 20 iron plates. So with the two smelter setup here, we can make a total of 40 plates per minute. Now again, you can merge them together like we have done so here, or again you can split them off, keep them as they are. It's all dependent on what your factory actually needs. Secondly, we move on to the iron rods. Now again, this is just a case of doubling up from the impure node. So we have the two smelters splitting off into the two constructors each. So we have the 30 iron ingots going to the two constructors, producing us 15 iron rods per constructor. These are then all added together if you so wish to make a full Mark 1 belt of 60 iron rods per minute. But again, all dependent on what your factory setup is like or what your needs are. You can either keep these separate, you can store some off, you can maybe even send some off to go and make some iron screws, or again you can add them all together and send them as and where you need them to go. Finally, here we have the screws being produced. So again, we start off with the iron rod setup that we have. So the two smelters splitting off to two separate constructors each, and then in this instance we've re-merged all 60 iron rods together onto the Mark 1 belt. Now, as said in the previous one, if you so wished, you could just keep them separate and have these two on the left together and these two on the right together. And then what we've done here by adding them all together is we've had to split the line into two lots of 3 screw constructors. As we know from the Impure Node, we need 30 iron rods to feed 3 constructors to make screws. So if you wanted to make it simpler and less splitting off and less adding, as just said, you could leave the left 2 constructors together as 30, the right 2 constructors together as 30, and have 2 separate belt lines feeding these 2 lots of 3 constructors. Now, just to see if we could make things look a little bit neat and tidy, I've just added in these storage boxes at the bottom just to show you some sort of an idea of what you could do. If you wanted to store them, you don't have to. Again, you can send them off to different production areas of your factory, which you most likely will need to do so. But always remember that when you add these 3 screw constructors together, when you add the first 2 together, the first belt is going to be a Mark 1 belt for the 40 screws. You'll have 80 in the middle, so that will need to be a Mark 2 belt, which carries the 120. And then again, the final belt will need to be a Mark 2 belt because that adds the 120 on, which is a full Mark 2 belt line. If you have the Mark 3s, you can actually add all 6 of these together with another 30 items spare. But again, as this is just a beginner setup, I'm expecting you to have these set up in your early starter factories when you don't have access to these Mark 3 belts. So now that we have 2 smelters at our disposal, we can set up a mini beginner factory. So here we've got the basic impure setup for the iron plates, the 1 smelter to the 1 constructor, which is the 30 ingots producing us the 20 iron plates per minute. Now the left smelter here is a little bit more complicated, but just bear with me, we'll just quickly go through it. So simply it's been split off into the 2 constructors to make the 15 rods per constructor. So that's 30 rods per minute being produced. We know the constructor at the end to make those screws needs 10 rods per minute. So using this splitter here, we're splitting it 3 ways and sending 5 to the left, 5 straight on, and 5 round to the right. The 5 round to the right is merging with the 5 being sent straight on to give us the 10 rods per minute we need to have the constructor running at 100% efficiency, producing the 40 screws per minute. Now the 15 rods from the left constructor are being added with the surplus 5 rods from the right, and that is giving us the 20 rods per minute as stated on the board at the top. We finally move on to the pure node here, so you can see that the Mark II belt is being used here as we are producing 120 iron ore per minute, which means in the following examples we now have 4 smelters at our disposal. So here again, this is just a double up from the normal node, so we've got 1 smelter to 1 constructor still, allowing us to use 4 constructors, which allows us to produce 80 iron plates per minute. Now again, you can merge them all together like we have done here, keep them separate. Again, it just depends on whatever is more suiting to the factory that you have set up. Don't forget, if you are adding all four of these together, you just need to remember that when you add the fourth one on at the end, to have a Mark II belt, because it takes you over the capacity of the Mark I belt of 60 items per minute. The iron rods is still no different, it's just a double up of the system from the normal as well. So we've got one smelter heading off to two constructors again, and this allows us to have 8 constructors to the 4 smelters, which gives us 120 iron rods per minute. Again, as said previously, you can split these off or add them all together. Just note that when you add the first 4 together, they are on a Mark I belt. The next 4, all the belts in between the mergers, will need to be a Mark II belt, as the capacity is too large for a Mark I belt. So this is where the first complications can start to arise in the game. So with the Pure Node, we still have the 4 smelters available. So it's the exact same identical rod setup that you have just seen previously. Now with this, you can produce 480 screws per minute. So the simple way of doing so to keep everything nice and easy and simple for yourselves is to group it all together and break it down. So in this example here, we've got the left smelter sticking together with the merger in the top left corner being split evenly to the 3 constructors. The second smelter is being merged together as well for the next 3 constructors along the back line. The third smelter and constructor setup is being merged together and moved to the last 3 constructors in that back line. And the fourth smelter and constructor setup is being merged and added to the 3 constructors on the right hand side. Now you'll see here from this angle that we have got all of the screws being put onto their own belt line. This is because at this stage in the game I'm not expecting you to have access to the Mark III belts. So each grouping of 3 constructors, as we already know, produces 120 screws. So they are all on a Mark II belt. So when you add the second constructor to the first merger, every line from then on will need to be a Mark II belt, so that you have the capacity to carry the items along at full efficiency. So the final piece of advice I have is a Pure Node beginner factory. So again, we have the 4 smelter setup here, utilizing the full 120 iron ore per minute being produced from your Mark I miner. We've got the 2 smelters on the left producing iron plates, so we are getting 40 iron plates per minute. As we know, it's a 1-to-1 ratio of 30 ingots to 20 iron plates. Then finally, the 2 right smelter constructor setups are producing the 30 iron rods, of which the left setup is adding together to produce the 30 rods per minute for your storage or for your other applications. And finally, the right smelter constructor setup is being merged together and then split off into 3 more constructors to produce the 120 screws per minute. Again, this is just a basic idea of what you could do to utilize the full efficiency of a 120 iron ore per minute Pure Node. Not set in stone. If you wish to do this any other way that you want to, by all means get creative. That's what the game's all about, and just go for it. The more creative you can be, the more weird and wonderful stuff you can come up with, the more you're going to get out of this game. It's a phenomenal little game. I absolutely adored it since joining along with it since update 3, and I'm hoping that with the new update in the very near future of update 8, we are only going to get bigger and better things from this game. So I've been Spider Nebula. Thank you very much for your time and sticking with me through this guide. Please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, join along the crew and head on to the subscribe button. And as I say, if there's any other guides you'd like to see, please drop it down in the comments below. I read them all and I take the care and time to reply to them all because they just mean so much to me. Thank you very much for your time. I wish you all a wonderful day, and hopefully I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.